Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson, and we're continuing our study of the resurrection events in the Bible, the 7 miracles of raising the dead, 2 from the Old Testament, Elijah and Elisha, 3 from Jesus, the raising of the widow of Nain's son, the raising of Jairus' daughter, and the raising of Lazarus, and then 2 from the New Testament, Peter and Paul. So we have 3 from Jesus. 3 is a significant number, and then 7 itself is a significant number in the Bible as well. And we said early on that there really is even a consistent parallel between the raising stories of Elijah and Elisha and the raising stories of Peter and Paul. The stories themselves all kind of interlock and connect together. The 4 stories that do not involve Jesus are private events, generally. The raising of Eutychus is kind of public because it involves the house church that's meeting in this house. But just a few people. It's not a public event in the market, in the square, The Jesus raising events are all in their own way public and involve crowds. And the other 4 happen in the upper room. Elijah, Elisha, and Peter and Paul's raising events all happen in an upper room or involving an upper room. Eutychus is actually fallen out of a window from the upper room when he's healed, but when raised, I should say. But anyway, they all connect in that way. So we have 2 more to look at before we take some time to look at Jesus' own resurrection. And we're going to look at the resurrection accounts in the Gospels, in the 4 Gospels after this. And we have the raising of Tabitha in Acts chapter 9. The book of Acts is roughly divided between, Peter's mission work and Peter's evangelistic work, I should say, and Paul's evangelistic work. And Paul's is longer than Peter's. And of course, there are other characters that we deal with, Philip, and Stephen and others who all come onto the stage and have a role to play. But the main character is the Holy Spirit, and the point of the book is the gospel of Jesus. But the 2 humans who dominate the action in the book of Acts are Peter and Paul, and there are a lot of parallels between Peter and Paul. We won't take the time right now to go into them, but their stories parallel a great deal. And Luke is quite the craftsman. He's underrated as a historian. I think he is the father of modern history, or at least of modern biography. Luke's gospel is just, a modern biography, and he tells us about his research process in the first 2 verses. And Acts is the follow-up to tell what happened after the death, the burial, and resurrection of Jesus and his ascension into heaven. In fact, the ascension of Jesus into heaven links the 2 books, interlocks the 2 books together, because it happens in Acts chapter 1. So Acts chapter 9, we're transitioning really between Peter and Paul. And it's towards the end of what we learn about Peter in the book of Acts. And Peter has a resurrection story, and Paul has one, and this is Peter's. And Peter's event reminds me a little bit of Elijah. And Paul's event reminds me a little bit of Elisha, just in their demeanor. But this also connects with the resurrection account involving Jesus. So let's keep our ears open for that. Acts chapter 9, beginning with verse 36. Now in Joppa there was a certain disciple named Tabitha, which translated in Greek is Dorcas, which translated then into English means gazelle. Her name is Gazelle. This woman was abounding with deeds of kindness and charity, which she continually did. When it came about, at that time she fell sick and died. And when they had washed her body, they laid it in an upper room. And since the Lydda was near Joppa, it's only about 8 miles away, the disciples, having heard Peter was there, sent 2 men, entreating him, "Do not delay, come to us." And Peter arose and went with them, and when he had come, they brought him into the upper room, and all the widows stood beside him weeping, and showing all the tunics and garments that Dorcas used to make while she was with them. And Peter sent them all out, and knelt down and prayed, and turning to the body, he said, "Tabitha, arise." And she opened her eyes, and when she saw Peter, she sat up. And he gave her his hand and raised her up, and calling all the saints and widows, he presented her alive. And it became known all over Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. And it came about that he stayed many days in Joppa with a certain tanner named Simon. We're on the seashore. Lydda and Joppa are both on the seashore. Joppa is the larger town. In fact, Joppa is still there. We just know it as Haifa. It's still there in Israel. You know, it's a major city, and that's where she is, and she's evidently living with, or in a community with other widows, and they're doing good deeds, mostly sewing. We have our own group of ladies here, and some men sometimes at the church at Manassas, serving by sewing, and they meet every month, and they have made so many garments and helped so many children in need on the Texas-Mexico border over the years, and they continue to do this. And we know from 1 Timothy that Paul instructs, 1 Timothy chapter 6, Paul instructs Timothy about widows and widows being enrolled and being supported by the church so that they can do good deeds. And so this seems to have already been going on. And Tabitha is part of that. Tabitha is her Aramaic name. That's important. I think Luke connects us with the Aramaic for a reason, because it's going to connect us back to the raising of Jairus' daughter. Do you remember what Jesus said when he raised Jairus' daughter from the dead? We have it in Aramaic. He said, Talitha cum, little girl, get up. And Peter, here says, Tabitha cum, Tabitha, arise. Tabitha, get up. It's one letter off. And we have Peter literally repeating everything he sees. He saw Jesus do. He was one of the three that was there. They're in an upper room. He prays. He takes her hand. He says the words, the very words, with one letter different, and says, and then takes her hand, and she gets up. I just love that. I just love that detail. The resurrection account connects with Elijah and Elisha in that it's in an upper room. It's not a child, but he is giving someone necessary to the community back to the community. We have to have her back, they say, and he obliges and brings her back, and prays to God first, the way Elijah and Elisha both pray to God and ask. Peter just reminds me of Elijah in his personality. So Paul, we'll see next time when he raises Eutychus from the dead, is very much Elisha in doing it, because it's so downplayed, you know. But this is something that is spoken of throughout Joppa, and everybody knows and people believe. Anyway, well, that's our next to last resurrection event. We're going to look at Paul raising Eutychus next time. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word.